When he came home, I would get in the tent and I would be like, this is your safe space, Grace. This is your safe space. And I would just hide in the tent and huddle and just sing that song in my head. I don't think I ever told him that, actually. I was scared of him. I was growing increasingly scared, and he was growing increasingly erratic. What's good, YouTube? It's Gracesandra, and I am going to complete part 4 of my series, How I Survived Very Severe Verbal Abuse and Narcissistic Abuse in a almost 6-year intimate partner relationship in my marriage with my ex-husband. What it felt like when I did part 3 was that I really wasn't able to conceptualize what it looked like going into 2017, and I think that's really important because 2017 really paved the way for me understanding that I needed to go. I'm going to just break it down a little bit more. 2016 is the year that I had our daughter. I had her mid-July. From January to July, from the 30,000 foot view, is when he had started pulling away. He started hanging out with one of the women where he worked at. He was still on Match, and then he stopped Match in March, and then he started up a heavy flirtatious relationship with another woman where he worked. He had pulled away from me completely, emotionally, physically, spiritually, sexually, in a friend way, in any way. He was not pursuing me in any way, and I think what makes it very difficult to explain all this, when I was looking back at part 3, I was like, I don't really feel like I got the crux of the issue. That he was still telling me he loved me. You know, when I would call when he was at work, because we weren't living together, he was just coming home every 3 days. He would still say, I would say I love you, and he would say I love you too. He wasn't making any effort to move in, of course. The environment when he was home for those 3 days was very, very toxic. 6 or 7 months into my pregnancy, so that might have been March, April, May-ish. I don't remember exactly. But I remember I was always so excited for him to come home because, as I mentioned, I was like really had the libido of a 16-year-old boy while I was pregnant. But then when he would get home, it wasn't just that. I was also really excited to see him, and I always hoped every time this was the time he was going to actually be nice to me like he was before we got married. But then when he would get home, I remember feeling, I wish he was gone. I can't wait till he leaves, because it felt so toxic and so cold from that time. And so I wanted to tell y'all one story that I didn't tell in part 3 of that time. I was probably about 7 months pregnant or so. I had hyperemesis in that pregnancy, which for those of you who don't know is when you throw up a lot in pregnancy to the point that you get dehydrated and you have to go on IVs. It was my 3rd pregnancy. I was almost 40 years old when I had this child. It was an older maternal pregnancy, or not maternal, what's the word they use? I forgot. Anyway, I was older, so there were more risks. I also had huge fibroids, and every time she moved, it was like push on the fibroids. It was really painful. I also had very severe sciatic nerve pain to the point that I would be bent over or stuck on the couch or stuck in my car because my sciatic nerve hurt so bad. So I was having a lot of pain in the pregnancy. I wasn't able to quite explain in part 3 how much that made me want him more and need him more. I felt very physically vulnerable. And when he wasn't around, I still had 2 other kids to care for that weren't his from my first marriage. So there was one night where I was being kept up by the pain of my daughter kicking on those fibroids that were pretty massive. I sat over on my side of the bed, and I was just like bending over, like rocking, breathing. And I wanted him so badly. I wanted him so badly to notice and be like, hey, are you okay? Like, let me give you a hug. It'll be all right. Let me rub your belly. Let me pray for you, just anything. And so I tried to like make a lot of noise and groan and grunt, like I just wanted to get his attention, but it didn't wake him up. At some point, just being like, baby, it hurts. It really hurts. And just hold my belly. I looked over at him because he was behind me. I was like sitting on the edge of the bed, and he was laying down, and I looked over at him, and he looked at me, and he was like,
what do you want me to do?
And he just had this super harsh tone. It was just very obvious. He's not here for you, Grace. He's not going to care for you at all in any way. Will not even give you empathy in the middle of the night for the baby he helped you make. I started crying, and I was just sad because I was just so defeated. And he was like, and I was crying like this too. Like the kind of cry that one does, they feel so utterly, completely defeated. I remember he was like,
if you keep crying, I'm gonna go to the other room.
And I just couldn't. I could not stop crying because I felt so vulnerable. And so that might be a good way to sum up how completely unfriendly he was as a human in general, let alone as a husband, let alone as a father, let alone as my baby daddy. I mean, there was no kindness in that entire time. But after I called her, that got us into a discussion. And what struck me about that discussion that we had in the hospital when I finally confronted him on everything, and he lied about all of it. But what struck me is I was like, you know, it's obvious that you don't like me anymore, let alone love me. And I was like, sometimes I think that you hate me. You seem like you hate me. You treat me like you hate me. But then you tell me you love me. That produces a lot of cognitive dissonance for me. That's at least what I was trying to explain, but I don't think I had that language yet because I wasn't yet doing research about how to deal with all of this. What he told me was that he had a turning point once our daughter was born, that he realized that he had been taking me for granted. He realized he had been doing things wrong, so he was going to try to be better and try to do better. So when we had her in mid-July until the end of the year, December of 2016, it's while he was trying to do better, and he wrote me this beautiful poem and drew me a beautiful picture for our 1-year anniversary. Was like exactly 4 weeks after our daughter was born, and he was going to try to do better. But because he had been telling me so many lies, I didn't know the truth yet. That happened after our daughter was born, that I was asking him about what happened that night, what happened with this person, what happened with this person, and he was slow drip. There's a phrase for it. Yeah, it's something about slow drip and lies and truth or something, where basically you're telling just enough truth to keep someone in a state of either paranoia, pain, trauma. Just, it's a very cruel form of emotional manipulation. It's one of the hardest things that I feel like I've ever been through. And I do mean ever. In our relationship, I've mentioned that the touch deprivation was incredibly painful. The verbal abuse all around was incredibly painful. But this form of verbal abuse, which is whatever that's called, the phrase is that I can't remember, but lying is a form of verbal abuse, especially consistent lies over time that create a false reality for the person. And what it does is your brain wants to know the truth, so you can't stop thinking about it. So we were talking about from mid-July until the end of December, we were talking about what had happened and what was happening just about every weekend. And I was trying to explain to him, you're drawing out these lies, and I need to know the truth. And he wouldn't tell it to me. He kept telling me more and more and more lies until he dug himself into a pit. And then when I found out, that's when he told me that it was a chore to have sex with me, and the marriage was horrible and it's over, which was probably about the 10th or 11th time he'd said that. But he was claiming that he was trying to get better. And when I mentioned in part 3 that when I realized that he was a very severe verbal abuser, it felt like a boulder of bricks pouring over me. That was about October, November-ish of 2016. And I would like to keep that in mind, because one of the things that I feel like he did that was so unfair about all of this, I mean, it's all unfair, but I hated that he robbed the joy out of the newborn life of my daughter. I was constantly in high stress. I was constantly crying. I was constantly miserable. I was constantly spending days trying to find the truth. Y'all, when I tell y'all, I spent days in obsession, going through his emails back to the year 2000, going through his Twitter, his Facebook, looking up things. Almost felt like I was playing a game of Clue or something, and I had to just keep going, like I was some sort of private detective or something. Like, I spent days of my daughter's newborn life just trying to find out what the hell my husband was doing, like looking at Google Maps, comparing things, phone records, calling numbers to figure out which numbers he was calling, trying to figure out, is my husband a serial cheater? Is he just a little bit of a cheater? Was he on Match? How many, like calling AT&T, trying to figure out what happened in 2015. Very obvious to me he was never going to tell me the truth. And I was so underslept. I don't know if any of you have had a newborn before, but when you have one, you're underslept and you're hurting and your body is hurting. And on top of all that, I had a husband who was fucking emotionally torturing me with lies, with verbal abuse, with cruelty every time I brought it up, and abuse and belittling. There was cruelty when I cried because I was overly sensitive, and that's also another verbal abuse tactic. He had broken me down to such a state, and he was trying to do a little bit better with the sex thing because I had told him that was so hard on me. It was a very hard time. And it was one of the first times too that I recognized that no one was going to believe me about how bad it was. And I remember one time my sister-in-law saying like, yeah, my mom was wondering why you always talking about being in pain and stuff. And then she was like, and I just finally told her what my brother's been putting you through. And that made me really sad because I had been trying to like have a positive outlook. I was still sharing online because I've been an online blogger and like social media person for a lot of years. And so I was trying to share the positive days and share cute pictures and videos and FaceTime live of my daughter. And so when I tried to explain that I was in so much pain every day, nobody really understood that. And it was very hard for me to articulate what he was doing. And then November 26th, the absolute most horrible day, is when Trump was elected. As y'all might remember, I talked about him deciding he was going to just all of a sudden become a Trump supporter, and he was tweeting pro-Trump, anti-everything I am stuff, but he was also tweeting really, really, really abusive, misogynistic, anti-Hillary Clinton propaganda, bullying, obnoxious, terrible behavior, like I've said before, and it was very scary. It was one of those things where it was like, you say you're trying to do better, you say that you're trying to not be as verbally violent with me, but all I'm seeing online is unbelievable verbal violence. There was one time in a month or so after Trump was elected where he made a YouTube video, it's since deleted, about all the ways he would like to see Hillary Clinton die. At the time, what he told me was that it was supposed to be a joke, that lots of comedians and stuff make political jokes and they joke about bad things happening to politicians. But he's not a comedian, and he's never been a comedian, and he's not that kind of a funny guy. He doesn't have like a slapstick kind of humor. I didn't have the heart to tell him this at the time, but he literally just looked like a psychopath. It was so scary for me. He looked angry, he looked mean, he looked serious as hell, that he really wanted to murder Hillary Clinton in like a bunch of different ways. I sent it to like 5 people. I was like, I have to know, is all the stuff that's happened with us, is it clouding my reasoning? Because this feels so crazy. One of my besties, she was like, this is not okay. You need to confront him about this. I confronted him about it. This is really violent. This does not show me that you're changing. And he blew up. He blew up with such intensity of blowing up. It became a huge fight where he was screaming horrible things at me. We were on the phone when this happened. I don't remember exactly what he said. Thank God. Sometimes when I think back on all the awful shit he said that traumatized me, I'm thankful that I don't remember what he said, but I don't remember what he said, but it was something about black women again. And I started trying to tell him how when he talks poorly about black women, it harms me, even if it's just on Twitter. And by that time, I had already looked up this idea of witnessed violence, which is you can still feel harmed by someone if you witness them being violent to someone else. He was steady like, don't bring that into our relationship, don't bring that up. But his violence on Twitter was so obnoxious, it harmed me just by seeing it. But that video, the Hillary Clinton video, was so disturbing because I was just like, what is this man capable of? And it got to the point, it was so bad around that time that I would thank him for being nice to me. If he were nice for a day, I'd be like, oh my God, baby, you're working so hard. Thank you so much. Like, you were so mean yesterday, but today you were so nice. And I was just super skewed. So anyway, that leads into the story that I brought up in part 3, where on New Year's Eve, he got a little tipsy. He yelled at me, do you think I give a fuck about you? I ran back into the bedroom. I thought he might kill me. The next day after that, I started researching really hard Stockholm Syndrome. That's when I realized I had it. Now I'm going to move on from there. So after that, when I realized I had Stockholm Syndrome, that was one of the first times where I thought, Grace, you have to go. You have to think about going. You cannot stay in this. When January 11th rolled around, I always felt for like 3 years an intensity of pain. And here's why. In January 2014, I realized that he was engaged to a woman, and I realized from all of my Inspector Gadget work that I had done that he was flirting with another woman online while he was engaged to this other woman. That's in January 2014. We didn't even know each other yet, but I knew that, and it was kind of in the back of my mind. In January 2015 is when we were together and we were falling in love, and we were talking about having a baby, and we were talking about getting married, and we were talking about all this stuff, and he started a brand new relationship with someone on eHarmony. Just started one as if I wasn't existing. Then in January 2016 is when he started this flirtatious relationship with a woman he worked with, and he also started treating me really badly. Coincided. So in January 2017, when January 11th rolled around, I was getting triggered. But those things happened to happen all on January 11th, by the way. It was like the weirdest, randomest thing. The first text I saw to the one woman at the call center, the first email I saw to the eHarmony woman, all those things happened on January 11th. So I kind of prepared him like, hey, I'm starting to feel a lot of anxiety about January 11th coming up. I just want you to know it's gonna hurt. It's already hurting just thinking about all the things that have happened in January for the last 3 years. Actually, I didn't even tell him about what happened in 2014 because I knew that would piss him off. But it really was important to me because I felt like that's the kind of man you are. You were engaged to somebody, and I saw you flirting online with this other woman, talking about how her lips are so big and juicy and you want to kiss her. And knowing, this is what got me. It was knowing the woman he was engaged to. I had saw all their emails when I was peeping on his email. She was so happy to be marrying him. She seemed so happy to be marrying him. And I knew, like, if she saw that, she would be so sad. She would be so sad, you know? It was another one of those, like, witness violence thing, but I didn't tell him that I knew that, not then. So when January 11th came around, at some point I think I called him crying at work, or maybe I left him a Voxer message, and we got into a really big argument. He was not, at that point, he was not able ever to receive correction from me, to listen to me talk about my pain, to just let me cry. He always got defensive. He was always mean. He would always bite back into me. He would always turn it back around on me. I was not allowed to be in pain about shit he had done to me without saying, why are you bringing old shit up, and all of that whole thing. It was always really new, fresh pain, so it didn't feel like old shit to me in any way. And when he got home that night, I wanted so much, because we had been fighting like the whole way home. We had been arguing either on the phone, text, or Voxer, I don't remember. I was sitting on the floor in the baby's room playing trains with her, and I really wanted him to come in and be like, babe, I'm sorry, like, let's just patch this up. And I'd have been like, okay, baby, okay. Wanted him to, like, come to me just a step, just one step, just one little step. If he had came one little step, if he had even looked in the room when he walked by, I'd have been like, baby, I'm sorry, we fought, like, I just want to get through this. Even though he was horrible to me that day. But he didn't even look in the room. He didn't look in the room on the way back. He just grabbed his gym bag, and then he yelled from the front door, I'm going to the gym. And then he came back, and when he came home, he didn't talk to me at all. He didn't touch me at all. He didn't interact with me in any way. He started stonewalling me. The next 2 or 3 days, he did not speak to me when he came home, and it felt like he was punching me. I know that's kind of a hard thing for some people to understand, but when you get traumatized enough through verbal abuse, and stonewalling is a form of verbal abuse, your brain literally cannot decipher the difference between somebody punching you and the pain you feel, or the emotional trauma that they're causing you. I just remember a delineation where things started hurting so bad all the time. I felt like literal pain in my body when he was saying cruel things and doing cruel things. I felt it so deeply everywhere, just everywhere. My body would hurt. And it got to the place all the way at the end where when he would be verbally abusive to me, I could feel it in my cheeks. Like my cheeks would get really heavy. Like while it was happening, I could feel my cheeks like weighing down. And then it got to the point, of course, where I had horrible panic attacks. So when he would be doing terrible things and being terrible and saying terrible things, like my heart would start aching. And I would just be like, please stop, please stop, please stop. But at that point, that was just the beginning of that kind of thing happening. When he wouldn't talk to me for those 3 days, all because I dared to bring up that I was hurt about things that had happened in all 3 Januaries. I felt like I can't win. I'll never win. I'll never win. I'll never win. I felt so hopeless, and it hurt so bad for him to ignore me. I really can't describe it. And so finally I decided to press the issue, because I was like, I will pick a fight with him just to get him to interact with me and to touch me again, because he wouldn't let me touch him either. So I don't remember what I started talking to him about. All I remember is how I felt. He said some things that scared me. He threatened to leave, of course, but he said some things that scared me, and because of the Hillary Clinton video, I was pretending. Baby, it's okay. I'm not mad about any of that. I'm fine. I'm really good. I'm totally fine. I'm over it. I'm over all of this stuff. I'm not gonna bring this stuff up anymore. It was very disingenuous, like the way I just said it to you. It was completely disingenuous. Like, I'm fine. Like, it was the worst acting ever. Like, I could have got a raspberry, or whatever that word is, the razzle. I don't know, razzie, I think. I was lying so bad, not even a good lie. He was just like,
all right, we cool? We cool? We good?
And kind of like gave me a fist bump. And I was just like, what the fuck? What the fuck is going on? Like, he can't really believe that I'm fine, that everything is fine. He can't. He cannot. But he did. Or maybe he just wanted to shut me up, but it worked. So I started thinking very seriously about needing to have an exit plan. In February of 2017, we were going to Chicago. The baby was really, really little. The rest of January had been very, very bad. I was feeling almost constantly suicidal. I was still bargaining. The predominant feeling that I felt in January was, I love him with everything in me. I cannot lose him. I cannot lose him. I will not lose him. It was like I'd be praying like, God, please rescue him. Please rescue us. Please change him, Lord. Please help him to see. Please help him to understand. Please give him humility. Please let somebody talk to him like God. Please. Bargaining and begging with God in my grief, because I felt like I cannot live without him. I will not live without him. I will not. There is no circumstances in which I will live with. I was incredibly passionate in my Stockholm syndrome. I kind of felt like maybe if he starts to come around to some things could be different. So I kind of changed my strategy. And instead of letting him in on my pain and hoping that he would help heal me, I decided to try to really focus in on trying to heal him, which if y'all know where this is going, you know you should never try to heal someone who does not want to be healed, because you will almost kill yourself in the process, which is what I did for the next 2 years. I decided to focus on that, so I was praying all the time. I was asking people to pray. I was giving people specific requests, pray for this specifically. I was basically like had him on my mind. I was writing out my prayers all the time. Just to be clear, I'm a Christian since 1996. I have come to believe in the power of prayer and have seen a lot of answers to prayer, and prayer is also something that I love to do. I've always felt a sense of God's presence in prayer, and I've just seen so many answered prayers in my mind at this point. Undeniable that God answers prayers, but in this instance I was committed to praying for my husband. I was going to be like power of the praying wife, for real. While we were there, we went to church with his family, and this lady came up to him who he knew of but barely, because he used to go to that church back when he lived in Chicago. And she said to him, I was standing right there, and she was like, God told me to come over and talk to you. And she was pointing in his chest, pointing at him, and she was like, God said, stop being so angry all the time. Stop dealing with your wife in these ways. And I just assumed probably his dad, who goes to this church, has told people, yeah, my son is losing his ever-loving mind. Can y'all pray for him? Or told them what was going on. But we did find out later that she didn't know any of it, and that his dad hadn't shared with anybody in the church. So it really was a very prophetic word, and it gave me hope. God is answering my prayer. He had this woman come and talk to her, and she spoke to a lot of stuff that she shouldn't have had no knowledge of if God hadn't communicated it to her. On the way home, I don't know why, I got some bravery to say, I don't know if I can do this if things don't change quick enough. I don't know what made me have that bravery, because I lost it for like 2 more years after that. I just don't know if I can do this. And we got to his parents' house, and we were all gonna have lunch with the family, and so you want the marriage to be over? And I was like, I mean, I don't know, maybe we should be separated. When we got to his parents, I just started bawling my eyes out, and we went down the basement. The interesting thing happened is I wanted him to get to the place where he was like, yes, I think we probably should take a break until I can get my shit together. But people being people, they went down one by one. His brother, then his dad, then his stepmom, then his sister, and everybody convinced him that he should stay with his wife, because that's the noble and honorable thing to do, without anyone like really understanding that I was actually trying to help him get to the place where he was owning, I've been incredibly problematic to you, so I'm going to leave. There was one point where we were sitting at dinner, as after he had decided like he's gonna stay and everything, and I looked at him during dinner, and he just looked so cute, like, oh, he's so beautiful. And then thought, I can do this, I can work with him, we can make this right. I got renewed hope. And so I just looked at him and I was like, hey, I love you. And he was like, I love you too. We just mouthed it, like didn't say it out loud, but it felt like really genuine to me. But then we got in the car to go home, and y'all, it was probably the worst verbal abuse from him I've ever endured. It was all during dinner. He was kind, talking to everybody, laughing with everybody. He just snapped into a different person, and he was
Like, so what was we talking about in there?
yeah, I just was thinking maybe it would be good for us to separate for a little while you start working on your stuff. I will never forget this. It was intensely painful. He started going off on me and saying really cruel things. I don't remember. I think in part because I just blocked it out. It's a 2-hour drive home, so I was trapped in the car, and he was saying incredibly cruel things about regretting marrying me, about how he was right, women really are just fucking evil parasites, and I'm no different. And there was one point where he said,
Why don't you just go out and start fucking somebody tomorrow? I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what you do.
and I was just steady trying to negotiate him with like, well, but I would be sad if you slept with somebody tomorrow. And I was like, why would you be sad? You don't even care about me. He was like,
You're right, I don't give a fuck what you do.
and he just was in this like super angry place, and I was in a super broken down place, crying hard, really hard. And he just was going on. It was just going on, and it just felt like he was like emotionally. I felt so beat up. There was one point where I asked him, please stop, please stop, please stop. I wanted it to stop hurting, and he just kept going. I was like a captive audience for the worst verbally abusive tirade he's ever given me. Because if we were anywhere else, I would have just left. I would have left the room. It was so deeply painful. It's February in the Midwest, and it was icy and it was cold. So he was driving, and I was already like this, huddled against the window, because I was trying to be as far from him as I could. It wasn't even that I was afraid he was going to smack me or hit me. It hurt that much. And so I was already like this, like huddled. And there was a point I looked outside, and I was like, what would happen if I just opened the door and just rolled out? And I knew it's nighttime, it's icy, it's cold, it's snowing, we're on an expressway. I won't survive that, but it will make it stop. It will make it stop. And then I was like, but you'll die. And you have a baby in the back seat and two beautiful boys at home. It was just one of the times that I was like, I'm literally considering dying over staying with him. And it was kind of an eye-opener for me because I knew it's bad. It's really bad, Grace. Like, you're not in your head. This is not you being overly sensitive. This is bad. And that car ride, before he stopped, and I had been crying for an hour and a half straight. My ears were hurting. My face was hurting. My head was throbbing. And he was still turning it back around on me. He was still blaming me about everything he could think of. How I brought old shit up. How I'm too sensitive. How I can't take a joke. How I'm a useless SJW. Yeah, it was one of the most painful things. And then after that, when we came home, I decided, like, I don't care if I have Stockholm Syndrome or not. I need to start telling him that he needs to go. I initiated that conversation. He was really mad about it, of course, but then he said, you're right. All of that was inappropriate. I'm gonna go. We just didn't talk about it for a few weeks, and for every day after that verbally violent attack, I really couldn't sleep. I started thinking every night, I wonder when he's gonna kill me. I had read something typically about how abusers will escalate slowly, and as I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, he's been escalating. Like, the first sign of misogyny and anti-blackness and anti-womanness was like the fall of 2015, and then that escalated that whole fall. Then all of 2016 he escalated, that it got to the point where he was yelling in my face and putting his fingers in my face. And then what I saw of him in early January, just that side of him that was so angry, and then that huge hour-long tirade, I was just like, that's where this is going. If I stay, that's where this is going. Eventually he's gonna start beating me. It just felt like that's inevitable at this point. But I remember telling somebody, I'm starting to worry if he's gonna start hitting me or pushing me or kicking me or killing me. I'm starting to worry about it, and I'm worrying about it enough that I can't sleep. If I'm not worrying about that, my brain is just looping the things that he says to me that's evil. And I really don't think anyone who hasn't been through verbal abuse really understands what happens when that happens. Like, you get re-traumatized every single time. That's why some people argue that verbal abuse is worse than physical abuse, because with physical abuse you do heal in a certain amount of time. If you get a black eye, it heals in 2 weeks. But the things that he said to me, some of them looped in my head for a couple years, and they hurt me the same every single time. I think that's why women who are verbally abused tend to get complex PTSD, because it's like trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And then that's not including like the trauma of every day and all the tiny instances of abuse every day, which I think at its worst I was probably experiencing like 30 microaggressions of verbally abusive behavior a day, but they were not micro in any way. They were very outlandishly aggressive. And then one day, after a couple weeks after I talked about him going, he came home and he threw himself down on the floor and started crying really hard, and he was like, I'm sorry. And he smacked the ground, smacking the ground really hard. I'm so sorry. I had never seen him cry before, ever, and I'd never seen an outpouring of emotion, so I just assumed that meant he's changed. So I just kneeled down on the ground by him and I gave him a hug, and I was like, are you okay, baby? Are you okay? And he was just like, I'm so sorry. I'm never gonna do this stuff to you again. Please let me stay. Please let me stay. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to leave you and the baby. So I was like, okay, babe. Yeah, okay. I was always very soft on him. And I think part of that was just fear. For the rest of 2017, I was in a lot of pain a lot of the time. There were a lot of things happening still in terms of verbal violence, but the pain was intensifying because he was doing things that I don't think he understood really, really hurt me given our circumstances. Everything has to be contextual. Like, I had been asking him for such a long time, like, please compliment me. I feel ugly. I don't feel like you think I'm pretty. You barely ever want to have sex with me. You don't touch me. You don't compliment me. So he started making an effort and commenting on my social media posts. It was like I had to remind him every couple months, like, hey, don't forget, give me a compliment every once in a while, or maybe act like I turn you on if I put on lingerie, or if I ask you to have sex. Pretend like you want to have sex with me. That would be so awesome. The summer of 2017, I went to a conference, and on the way there, I saw that he had commented on one of his cousin's pictures that she looked like Janelle Monáe, and he had told me before, like, he loved Janelle Monáe, and he thought she was bad and all this stuff. So I knew that she was somebody who he thought was pretty. And he commented on his cousin's picture that she looked like Janelle Monáe. I just remember going into the bathroom and I just lost it. When I got home, I was like, I feel so vulnerable right now. Any man who came up to me and complimented me, I would be so tempted to cheat, because because I'm so parched for your energy and attention. And to see you give your cousin a compliment that was so generous, that was like a generous thing to say. Like, you look like the woman who I think is really pretty. And I was just like, do you not see that? How much I'm just begging you to water what you have. Pour some water on what you have, the garden that God gave you. Hold my hand, roll over at night and hug me, touch me, please. Like, initiate having sex with me every once in a while. The lack of those things without asking, it was just really hard. It was really hard. There were fights, pretty bad fights during that year, once a month, and that's when I started trying to hide under Revy's crib. I felt such an intensity of pain about the verbal violence. I started hiding under my daughter's crib when he would get started. Our daughter had a Dora tent. During the day while he was at work, I would get into the Dora tent and just huddle, rock myself back and forth. And the song that went through my head a lot of that year, interestingly enough, was this song by I don't even know who, from I don't even know what year. In the chorus, he says, "Don't hurt me again. Don't hurt me again." Oh, a teenage love. A teenage love. Don't hurt me again. When he came home, I would get in the tent and I would be like, this is your safe space, Grace. This is your safe space. And I would just hide in the tent and huddle and just sing that song in my head. I don't think I ever told him that, actually. I was scared of him. I was growing increasingly scared, and he was growing increasingly erratic the deeper he got into the conservative Republican movement. His pro-Trump support and his anti-black sentiment was really at a fever pitch. In the fall of 2017, like towards the end of the year, I was really deeply mourning how things were going for black people at that time. I remember telling him something that happened, and he told me about this book that he was reading, and he was like,
Are you aware of all the violent crimes committed against white women by black women?
He pulled up this book on Amazon. He was like,
I want you to read this.
And it was called White Girls Bleed a Lot. I'm only laughing because I really can't articulate the pain of that moment where he was trying to get me to have sympathy for white women while his own black wife was in deep, tremendous pain. I can't really explain how much dignity he ripped away from me as a human and as a black woman by constantly talking about anti-black sentiment and anti-black women stuff on Twitter, but everywhere. It came into our house. It got to the point where I wouldn't have anything that was overtly like pro-black or culturally black music playing on the TV, anything, because he would get angry. And there was one time my kids and I were watching the American Girl story, the girl from Detroit, and he came in right on the part where she stood on the desk and she was like, I don't like this national anthem, and she's throwing a fit about it because but my people are, because it's set in the 60s during the civil rights movement. He had come in right, and I had froze up because I was scared of what he was gonna say, and he was like,
oh my God, turn this off. Like, why are you poisoning their minds like this?
And I was just like, God help me, please help me, please help me, please help me. So I actually had to tell my boys at some point. I was like, hey, if there's anything that says to you about black people or about black women or really about anything, don't listen to him. I don't want you to believe him. I was like, he's not well right now, and I need you to come back to me and let me know if there's anything he says to you. And I was like, also, this movie is fine. That little girl did was very brave and very courageous, and that's what I hope you would do. The fact that I had to tell my sons don't listen to him as a black man when he talks about black people, I just thought it was pretty sad. That leads into us going to marriage counseling because I was like, I really want to try to make this work. Before we went for our first session, I had pre-planned. This is another aspect of being abused. I always planned out what I was going to say. I wrote it out. I would type it out into my Evernote app, and I would also practice out loud what I was going to say to him so I could avoid being abused as a result of saying the things that I needed to say. So I started practicing what I was going to say in marriage counseling for our first session, and I will never forget. It was December. I was in my driveway coming home from something, and I was practicing what I was going to say about why we were needing marriage counseling, and I was just listing it all out. He's completely, terribly, verbally abusive. He's been lying to me about other women. He was on Match, always belittling me, always turning things around on me, not even including the political stuff and the Twitter and all that, because that was like this whole other issue that he would routinely blow up. It was not allowed to be talked about. It was a huge issue for me that we could not talk about it. When I was practicing this, I was feeling a depth of pain, like my whole body hurt, and I was crying. I just was trying so hard just to get through it to myself, practicing for the counselor. And when we had our first session, we were both sitting there, and the counselor said, so guys, what are you two here for today? And I went, and I was just about to start, and he said,
Betrayal.
That's what you think it's really about? You going to the movies with this woman and meeting with this other woman and being on Match all through our engagement, and this other woman that you started an eHarmony relationship with. You really think it's about that? Because all that's bad, but nothing is worse than how you have verbally annihilated me until I feel like shit on the bottom of your shoe. I wasn't allowed to say that. I could never have said that in front of him. It would have triggered the fuck out of him. So I just had to sit there. It became very obvious very quickly that marriage counseling was not going to be safe for me, because typically in scenarios where there is a verbally abusive person, verbally, narcissistically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, counseling just becomes another place that facilitates abuse. And I found that that was happening. He was allowed to verbally abuse me in the counseling session, and sometimes the counselor wouldn't even notice. I went and saw the counselor once by myself because I felt so exasperated, and I was like, didn't you see that he was gaslighting me in the last session? He was completely gaslighting me. And he was like, what's gaslighting? And I was like, oh, fuck this. Like, I'm not finna sit here and educate you on gaslighting. Like, counselors should know that. Counselors should know that. Especially when you're dealing with somebody who's saying, this man is so severely verbally abusing me, I'm literally sick and I want to die. And I want to kill myself in front of my daughter because that's how bad it is. And he was allowing it and asking me what the fuck gaslighting is. So I was like, I'm done. Because we did one more session. One was so terrible to me in that session. I left halfway through. I literally left and just sat in the car and waited for him because I was like, I am not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. So I stopped going and I told him he could keep going without me. In 2018, things changed because I got a job finally. I'd been applying for salaried positions and I had not gotten any of them. And in hindsight, I'm really glad because there was no way mentally I would have been able to handle anything at all. The state I was in was so broken. He had me so broken down. I could not have maintained a job, and I couldn't barely do what I was doing, which was just being a stay-at-home mom with our daughter. I was barely hanging on. She was watching way too much TV, and I was not present with her a lot of time, and I have a lot of regret about that. But I got a job, and it changed our financial situation so significantly. It was a really good paying job. It put us at a really great combined salary, like really good. And so we were able to immediately move out, get a house, start getting stuff we had always wanted. We were shopping, we got new furniture. I mean, we was feeling good, you know, just on that. He was also starting to like really understand and really try to do better. There's some point in there, I remember at the beginning of summer, I was like, oh my God, like he's working so hard. He's really changing. A lot of things are changing. We were having sex more often. He was being nice. He really hadn't verbally abused me very badly. There was still lots of things happening, but not very badly. And we went on a family vacation that summer because we was like, oh, we got the money now. And it was actually really fun. And later in the fall, in September of 2018, we went down to see his mom and his family down in East St. Louis. And while we were there, because they had a big family reunion, while we were there, felt like I fell back in love with him. Every day that I was there, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so great. Like we're just doing so well. The baby's healthy and happy. Like he was only being mean to me like once a month, and it wasn't even nearly as bad as before. I was also starting to feel better, whereas before then I was in constant pain, but I was starting to heal. I was starting to work on myself. I was journaling every day. I was doing gratitude lists every day. I was also trying to do some side hustles, and that was giving me some confidence. I was getting back into writing again. That was giving me confidence. So I was feeling good. We also were losing weight. We went on like a juice fast. We were trying to be healthy together. So we were losing weight together. We were both loving our bodies more. So there was lots of good things happening. And I just remember when we were down in St. Louis, looking at him during that whole time, just being like, damn, he's so fine. That's mine. We're doing better. He loves me. He's recommitted to me. Like, we're really gonna do this. That night, I was like, I really want to do it. And he was like, oh, and I was like, one, please don't make me beg you for sex all the time. So he was just like, all right, let's go. Because he was really wanting to show me, I'm going to be different. I'm going to have sex with him. And something about that time was very powerful, enjoyable, amazing. Felt intensely bonded to him. Now, the reason I said that's my issues coming out is because I was very severely sexually assaulted by my father as a child. I came to believe that sex and love go together. And so when I've had very powerfully connecting lovemaking experiences, sometimes it really feels like love, even if there's not love. And there was love between us, but it like put me on this other ether with him, almost as if none of the past had happened. how could someone fuck me like that and not truly love me? Almost like I had that belief in my head, which I know now is not true. And I don't even think that was necessarily on a conscious level. I think it was kind of on a subterranean level, but I was like bonded. I was like, I love this man so much. I will never not love this man. I felt so happy, y'all. After all that, I felt like I did it. I healed him. I did what I was supposed to do. And now we're going to get to be together and be happy. And he's going to just keep getting better and our marriage is saved. And I was telling everybody, all these miracles, look what God is doing. Da, 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 da. And then about 2 weeks after we got back, and when we got back, I was telling him like, baby, I love you so much. I'm so bonded to you. I feel so safe again. I feel happy. I feel loved. I feel like we're gonna do this. I was constantly communicating to him like how great things were. And then one night, I don't know why, we got started talking about racial issues, and racial issues were push button topic. He was saying something about black women again and something about our inferiority. I don't remember what it was, but I was just like, we're here again. And I just said in a very nice way, I said, do you think that maybe you struggle with some internalized racism? And he was like,
What?
because he was watching TV and I was on the floor with our daughter playing with blocks. To me, he was like,
What did you say?
trying to explain, I was just wondering if maybe you struggle with some internalized racism. You know, we all do to some extent. And before I could get it out, I was trying to tell him like I struggle with it. I believe that probably everybody in the country struggles with some internalized racism. And he got up and he was like,
Don't you fucking talk to me like that.
and he got really loud. And then he went to get his coat. He was like,
I'm fucking leaving.
I was like, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was freaking out because I was like, I can't like let this wonderful moment and this wonderful weeks we've been having like go away. I just went, I'm so sorry. And then I was like, let me just explain, please only, because he was going for the door. And I was like, please only, please. And I'm crying. And he came back and I was trying to explain it. The more I tried to explain it, like the worse it got. And he started clapping. And he's like,
You wanna fight? You wanna fight? That's what you want. You wanna fight?
he was circling around me and the baby. And I was just like, so as soon as he started saying he wanted to fight, I got scared and I was, can you please just stop, because the baby's right here and she's awake. Please just stop. Please, I'm begging you. I got really quiet and he stopped and he went over to the coffee table a few feet away from us. But when he went behind me, I was really scared he was going to grab me by my hair because my hair was on the ponytail. But he didn't. He went over to the coffee table and he put his finger up and he was like,
Alright, you ready to fight? Now you ready to fight?
he was still clapping, which I thought was really weird because it's not something he ever did before. And my heart was racing. I knew I had blown it. It was my fault. I said something I knew would be hard on him. I had to apologize. I had to tell him never mind. I had to tell him that of course he doesn't struggle with internalized racism. It's my fault. I probably struggle with internalized racism. And that's why I'm not seeing him correctly and blah, blah, blah. So I did all of that. I became an expert at de-escalating him, his anger, his violence, his verbal violence, his physical violence, all of it. And what I mean by his physical violence is like that kind of thing where he was like circling around us, clapping and stuff. Like, that's scary. That would be scary for anyone, but especially a mother with her little baby sitting in front of her. It was scary. I know he doesn't like to acknowledge that.
Like, boy, I never touched you.
Well, yeah, but that's intimidating when you're a smaller person and you have your partner who's much bigger, much stronger, and he's also trained in mixed martial art and used to like fight in like semi-professional fights and stuff. So I knew he could snap my neck in a second and kill me. So it's going to be intimidating. It's going to make you feel fear. It's going to traumatize you. So I had done enough work. I was reading tons of books at this point about verbal abuse, about abusers, about how I should respond, about things I should do. I was ingesting information about all this stuff. And I realized after that, for him to do that, I had been telling him for 2 weeks, baby, I feel so close to you. I love you so much. I'm so happy that we're going to stay together. I'm so happy that we're going to make it. I'm so happy you've been changing. I felt like for him to have a fall like that after working so hard all of 2018, he was like leaving me love notes every morning on the refrigerator. He was working hard. And what I've told people later, because that is when I decided to leave. That was my day that I decided I cannot stay with him no matter what he's doing. Because what I knew was that even though he was much better, let's say before he was a 10 on the verbally abusive, narcissistically abusive scale, he was now down to like a 2 or a 3, but he was still on the scale of being abusive. So what I needed him to do was get off the scale and be at a 0. No abuse is happening, not ever. But he was still like a 2 or 3, which was just enough to keep me traumatized, because for 2016 and 2017, 2017, he was a 10 all year. Both years, I was thoroughly, completely traumatized by his behavior. I didn't really realize that till later because he was like,
but I was doing so much better and stuff.
When we've debriefed this, and I'm like, yeah, you were, but you were still doing enough that left me in a constant state of panic and fear. And I just knew after that, I cannot stay with him and ever feel safe. And so I decided that I was going to start making plans to leave, but I wasn't going to tell him because I felt too scared. At that point, I was like, I'm too scared. A lot of women end up missing and dead when they try to leave their abusive husband. And I was like, I just don't know what he's going to do. This man has been incredibly erratic. But he overheard accidentally a message I left for someone else a couple months after that about how I was planning to leave. That was the end of Mr. Nice Guy. Completely. From there, it was almost like we were playing a game with each other where I was planning to leave. He knew I was planning to leave, but I was pretending like I wasn't. We were both pretending that it was working, but it really wasn't. And I'm not sure the extent to which he was, but I was still trying. As we were going into 2019, I was hell-bent on leaving. I was starting to tell friends, I'm going to go. I'm going to require him to move out, or I'm going to move out. And at that point, I really wanted to move out myself. I was going to counseling by myself and getting healing for complex PTSD. I had been diagnosed with acute stress disorder. I was unable to sleep. I probably since then have had ADD or ADHD because I've been almost 2 years now without being able to focus. Hardly ever. It's incredibly difficult for me to focus. I was experiencing constant paranoia, constant depression, lethargy, apathy, basically every consequence that someone has after being traumatized. So often I was experiencing, and because there was the lack of hope of us staying together anymore, it felt heavier. But at the same time, I was starting to feel better. Wow, pretty soon I'm going to be free of this. And I was trying to do a few things financially to get myself where I needed to go, and nothing was panning out. Finally, God blessed me with an amazing job where I was getting a really good salary. I think I forgot to mention that sometime in 2018, the other job that I had where we were making great money fell through. So I was without a job for a little while. So anyway, but I got a job in 2019 and it was just such a blessing. And like, as soon as I got it, I knew I could go because I would be on my own insurance and have my own salary, and I knew I could make it. I started asking him to move out, and probably sometime early 2019, I was at this place where I felt like I cannot let him know that I really want to go. I have to make him feel like it's his idea. So when we would have these hard conversations, I would always try to get him to be like, yeah, it is a good idea. Like, yeah, we should go. Yeah, we should stop trying to make this work. What I was telling him was I would like for us to consider what it would be like to take a year apart. And there was half of me that thought, yes, I'd like a year apart and I want to reconsider because maybe he'll change. And there was the other half of me that thought, he's never going to change. It doesn't matter. Just give it up. But all of me thought, I'm going to keep saying this to him because I don't have the balls to tell him this is over for good, because I just felt scared. So 2019 was essentially us trying to split our lives. It was incredibly difficult while we lived together, and it was intense to live together and be broken up, but he was sleeping on the couch. I realized what trauma bonding was. That's different from Stockholm syndrome, which is when you feel a lot of sympathy and empathy for your abuser. Trauma bonding is a physical condition inside your body that happens when you become physically peptide addicted to your abuser and to the cycles of abuse. And I never realized how much I was trauma bonded until we started trying to separate ourselves but still live in the same house. It was incredibly difficult for me to feel any little bit of separation. I would go right after him. And then I'd be like, what are you doing, Grace? And people would be like, what are you doing? Why are you still having sex with him? Why are you? And I was like, I'm still having sex with him because I still enjoy having sex with him. And he still was really not all that interested. So I was still like going after him because he was still kind of like, well, we're breaking up, so I don't really want to be sleeping with you. One of the last things that happened that was so awful is we had a big fight. There was a few things actually. We had a really big argument. It was about something that I saw his brother. He was trying to explain that I had complex PTSD and how that was playing out for me. And his brother said something really stupid, like really fucking dumb, that he could have Googled. I thought only people who went to war got PTSD. And he was trying to explain it, but the way he said it in the text message was still extremely condescending. I still had thumbprint access to his phone, by the way, so that's why I saw that he had went upstairs to change the baby's diaper or whatever. And I looked at it and I started putting on my IG stories how dumb people are, and how when someone's claiming to be abused, it's often not taken seriously until the woman is literally dead. What the fuck don't you understand about me having gone to war? I've been to war. I've been at war for 3 years trying to fight for my dignity and humanity. What the fuck do you not get about that? Obviously, I didn't say that to him, but I said it to my stories. And so when we got home, you know, he laid into me about my stories, and I was just like, come at me, bro. I don't care, because your brother is such an asshole, number one. And number two, I can't believe that you wouldn't affirm to him what I've been through, trying to help you heal, and the hell that you have put me through just by being your wife and just by being in proximity to you. And it blew up. I went upstairs to get away from it because I knew better. That was the rule. When you start going crazy, I'm just gonna go upstairs or go away or go outside or whatever, because I'm not gonna stay to listen to you abuse me. Like, I was strong enough in that. And I laid on our bed and I started crying really, really hard. He came in and he actually, for the first time, I think one of the first times, like, actually just didn't say anything. He just held me. And when he held me, I felt so comforted that I started crying harder. Oh, this feels so good. I'm finally being held. And when I start crying harder, he got up and he was like,
Man, fuck this. Every time I touch you, you start crying. What is the problem?
and I was just like, I'm crying because you're holding me. I was trying to tell him, like, I'm happy that you're holding me. And he took it as an affront, took it as an fucking offense. And so he started screaming at me about how every time he touches me, I start crying. And then I balled up on the bed because, again, it was another one of those times where it felt like physical abuse. My brain did not know the difference between him just punching me and saying all of this horrible shit. And so I balled up on the bed and he was like over me like this.
Shut the fuck up. Stop it. Stop acting like I'm abusing.
Because I was going like this. And I was rocking and I was crying, and he was like,
Stop it. Stop it. Stop doing this. Shut the fuck up. Stop doing this. I'm not abusing you. I'm not touching you. I'm not even touching you.
and he's just going off. I was just like, please stop, please. Please stop, please, 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 please stop. It was bad. And then I was just like, I have to go. I have to go soon. So at that time, I was starting to ask people for help. I was starting to tell people, like, I am severely traumatized. I was getting really bad panic attacks. Every time he was hard on me, mean to me, when he would belittle me throughout the day, I was getting panic attacks all the time. My heart was hurting and I thought I was dying. There's a couple times I went to the hospital and I was like, my heart is hurting. And they were like, you're just having panic attacks. What's going on? And I didn't want to be like, well, my husband is abusive, but he's not actually physically hitting me, because nobody would. It was really hard to explain, like, the kind of trauma he was putting me through. There was one time where we were in church, and while we were praying, like, we had our head down, like, while the whole church was praying, and he punched me in the leg. And I looked at him and I was like, why did you do that? And he said,
Because I can.
I just remember being so hurt, and when I got home, I didn't cry or anything. I was kind of getting used to it. I was numbing out to it. I was like, why would you punch me in church, like, while I was praying? Because he had never punched me ever. So it was like, the first time you decide to punch me, you punch me in church, like, while my head is down, while I'm praying, while I'm in a vulnerable position, when nobody else can see you, but it's still a public place. It just felt very fucking manipulative, and I was really hurt, and I was just like, I don't want this shit anymore. And I just said, please don't ever punch me again. You know, I have CPTSD. I'm already jumpy as hell. I already am in such a heightened place of PTSD that I can't hear anyone yelling. I can't see violence. I can't barely watch any TV. I can barely watch. I'm in such a heightened place of pain that my heart feels like I'm going to die.
You're making a big deal about it, but whatever.
I don't know, a month or so later after that, we were out talking about what we were going to do. It was a date, like a let's talk about how we're going to break up date. And we got back, we were sitting on the bed, and I was like taking off my pants and I was getting ready to change to go to bed, and he like punched me 3 times in the leg. Not really hard, not like a oh kind of thing. It hurt because nobody likes to be punched, but not hard enough to leave a bruise, not hard enough to make me cry or anything like that. And I was like, I asked you to stop doing that. I don't like it. I have CPTSD. Like, violence really is hard on me right now. Men being any sort of violent with me, it would make me instantly cry and start to hyperventilate. I was not having fake panic attacks. I was having real panic attacks all the time. And I was just like, it's the least you can do. We're already breaking up. Please don't hit me. And he said okay or whatever. But I used that as impetus because I felt like at some point I was like, I think he's gonna kill me. I think he's gonna end up killing me. I really do. And so I asked a couple people if I could move in with them, because I was like, I'm getting afraid for me and the kids, and I just want to get out of there. I can't deal with this anymore. Like, I was in such a state. I can't even really describe, like, I just wasn't functioning. They both said no. It was, I don't know. I got it because it's like I got 3 kids. If he were pushing me down the stairs or if he were beating me, like, I think people would have let me, but they didn't understand. I'm in as much pain as a woman who's being physically abused. I am in the depths of despair in a way I really can't explain, and really the only other people who understand that have been people like in the narcs. I'm in a narc support group, I'm in a divorce support group, I'm in verbally abusive support group, and those people got it. But like when I would try to talk to regular old people who've never experienced it, nobody was really taking me seriously. And I'm like, I think that he's gonna escalate and kill me, and people just were not taking me seriously. So I was starting to feel hopeless, and he was not making any moves towards moving out at all. I started a fundraiser. Well, actually, I had a friend of mine who was like, why don't I start a GoFundMe, like an anonymous GoFundMe. The anonymous GoFundMe picked up some steam. We set a goal, and the goal was gonna be enough to help me move out. Somewhere around, I don't know, July or August, he was like, actually, I found a place. And he was like, I move on September 1st. Decided to keep that money and use it for when I moved, because I knew I wasn't gonna be able to handle the house on my own. Before he left, we were still basically sleeping together. One of the last times that we did it, afterwards I just started crying, and I was just like, we're still gonna wait a year, right? And he was like, yeah, we're gonna come back and talk about it in a year. And it was again like half of me was hopeful, half of me was like, nah, I'm not coming back to this. Let's not date anybody or sleep with anybody or have any external anything. Let's just both work on ourselves for this year. Please don't start, please don't date anybody else right now. And he was like,
No, I wouldn't do that to you. I'd have to be a monster to do that. I'm not interested in women. I ain't thinking about women. I don't really want to deal with women.
and all of this stuff, and I should have known. He took a week off of work so he could move out the week before his move out date. I was still obsessed, completely obsessed. I had never stopped checking up on him. I had never stopped checking his Twitter, his DMs, his messages, his FB, his emails. I had never stopped any of that because I thought he was always lying to me, but also because it just fucking hurt. And I think there was part of me that in the trauma bond, I was addicted to the pain of that. So I found out that the week he was moving out, he spent a lot of time on the phone with this one number, and I confronted him about it. Because I'm like, you don't have nearly none of your stuff packed, and you done wasted this whole week gaming. Because I would come home for lunch and he'd be gaming or talking to this woman, and it was a friend of his from college, and he denied anything's going on.
She's just being there for me. We're just a friend from college. We've been friends for 20 years. If anything was going to happen, it would have happened already. I am so not interested in her, blah, blah, blah.
Long story short, I found out that weekend that we moved out, somebody had given me like a free retreat at an Airbnb so that I could just get some time to myself, because everybody in my life knew that I was severely traumatized by that point, and I wasn't functioning. I found out that while I was at the Airbnb, he had spent the night with her, and he had told me right before we had talked on the phone, and I was just like, are you gonna be with her? And he was like,
no, I'm going to a bar by myself, blah, 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 blah.
And I don't even really know how to encapsulate, but the next 4 months, October, November, December, January, February, 5 months were him lying about his relationship with this woman that was getting increasingly serious, and me telling him, we are broken up. You don't have to lie to me. Just tell me. And for whatever reason that I can't understand, he just kept saying, no, there's nothing going on. And then I would find out because she would post shit on the internet, or I would find out somehow. We were still sharing a bank account, so I was able to find out stuff that way, mostly just because of her. And I would find out, and then it would be like a big thing because he asked me to take our daughter for a weekend so he could go spend the weekend with her in Chicago. And I just said, if you're gonna hang out with her, like, that's too much too soon. Please do not have me take your parenting time so you can go on a fucking date for a weekend. And he's
no, I'm not gonna be with her.
And then, then she posts pictures, and it was just stuff like that where it was traumatizing me. And I know that I was not doing the right thing. I was obsessed. I was looking at her stuff all day. I was looking at his social media all day. I was thinking about it all the time. I understand like my complicitness and my pain, but at the same time, I was so addicted to it and I couldn't stop. And so the best way that I thought to handle it would be just to beg him for what I need. Like, I just really need you to tell me if you're with her, just tell me you're fucking with her. And then I can just face it. But he just kept lying about it. And I kept finding out. So every time it was just worse and worse. Another thing that happened during that time was that he got a surgery, like a major surgery. And we thought he could have died in the surgery. This was like really soon after he moved out. He basically was like,
I don't want you to come see me in the hospital. I'm going to go stay with my parents afterwards.
I was like, let me take care of you. Let me come see you in the hospital. I'm fine doing that. And he was like, no, he didn't want anything to do with me at that time. He hated how I was responding about her. And one night he told me like,
by the way, I took you off my life insurance and I put my mom.
And all of it just felt like such a betrayal. It was like, you're going to your parents' house in Chicago, which is where she lives, and you're telling me I can't visit you at the hospital and you might die. So I was feeling this, the trauma bonding was so severe. The only thing I can say when I look back on this is that my counselor has told me your trauma bonds are severely rooted trauma bonds. The worse the abuse, the worse the rooted the bonds are. And so the response that I was having, it was just interesting because I couldn't talk to anybody about it who'd never been narcissistically abused or trauma bonded because they had no patience for me. Like, why are you doing all this, man? Fuck that nigga, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, you do not understand what it's like to be addicted to the person you love and addicted to the pain that they cause you. I wanted to be there for his surgery. I wanted to take care of him afterwards. I wanted to prove to him I loved him so much so that he would love me back. Still, everything came to a head on New Year's Eve. My birthday is the day before New Year's Eve, and I asked him if I could go with him. Like, can I go with you to hang out to a party? And he was
Like, no, I'm just hanging out with my dude, Merv, in Indiana.
who I don't even think is a real person. But then he ended up hanging out with her, of course. He took her out, and they both posted an individual picture at the same place, and of course I figured it out. And I just was like begging him, stop putting me through this torture, just tell me the truth. And he wouldn't. He just wouldn't. And that was our whole marriage. I just wanted him to. So I was breaking down so badly. I had started seeing a counselor like 2 weeks before that. Hadn't been to a counselor for like a year before that. We're at the beginning of 2020 now, and I was like, I need to see you twice a week. Like, I'm breaking down. I cannot function. I can't take care of myself. I'm not eating. I'm not showering. I'm crying all the time. I'm in hysterics. I don't understand what's going on with me. And I started doing EMDR therapy, and I do have a series up on my whole EMDR experience. At that time, I was also begging him to have sex with me, like begging him, and he was saying no, 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 no. Finally, one night, I begged him for like 3 hours, 2 or 3 days after New Year's Eve, and he finally said yes, so we did it. And it was so humiliating. It was so humiliating. The whole experience was terrible. And then he went right back to her. He went right back to her after telling me, having some moments of like,
I'm so sorry, I'm not gonna do this with her anymore. Like, I know this is hurting you. Like, this isn't a good relationship anyway.
just lying about it, and then going back, and then me finding out. And it was like this really sick cycle. And I got so sick, y'all, like so ill from the cycle. I actually think that sometimes like the pain of the trauma bonding and that whole separation process was more painful than maybe some of the years of abuse, because it felt, I really can't describe it. The only way I was telling him was that it felt like my limbs were being cut off without anesthesia. Like, it felt like he's a part of me and he's being ripped away from me. It was almost like I was processing it like death. The intensity of the pain was so much that I couldn't do anything. I went into a severe depression, and I told my job, I'm being narcissistically abused. That's all I can tell you. I could try to explain it to you, but I am losing it. I am very suicidal. I'm in counseling twice a week, and I cannot put myself together. Like, I need like a 2-week medical leave. I can't come back to work. I need a 2-week paid medical leave, and they gave it to me, thank God. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, I was still so suicidal and I couldn't handle it. So I asked them for another week. I was like, I can't get out of bed. I don't even know how I was parenting during that time. And he was steady doing shit that was traumatizing me, and how he talked to me, and how he was lying to me, and how he was parading that woman around. That was earlier this year, so this is still fresh, more raw. And then in February, he lied to me again, said he wasn't gonna see her, and then ended up having her over to spend the night at his place on Valentine's Day evening. And in the morning, she fucking posted a picture of her outside of his apartment. And he had told me that he asked her not to, because he was like,
look, my wife,
because we were still married at that time, he was like,
she's breaking down. She's at the lowest point that I've ever seen her. She's not holding it together. Please don't post anything. He was like, I told her that.
And she still did it anyway. And I think that was like really the last string for them. He did tell me he felt some sort of compassion. He felt like why is she being evil about this? Grace is not okay. He knew that I was not okay. He had never seen me like that. It was one of the lowest points in my life. I think I was grieving everything he had ever done and this woman, and it was triggering all these rejection wounds in me, the abandonment wounds in me. I was doing EMDR, which was like kicking up in pain from my father's sexual abuse as a kid, and it was all crushing me like an elephant sitting on my chest, and my panic attacks were so bad that I was actually either going in or thinking about going into the hospital every other day. There was just one day after the 8th or 10th EMDR session, working really hard, and I want y'all to know this whole time I was reading hella books, listening to hella books, talking to hella people, writing, praying, meditating, doing gratitude lists, trying to do self-care, dancing, doing everything I could possibly think of to get through the time. Everything. Anybody says you should do to try to heal, I was doing. I was not drinking, I was not smoking weed, I wasn't doing any drugs, or I've never done any drugs. I wasn't watching a whole lot of TV. I was shopping a lot. I really wasn't doing anything to numb myself but shopping. I was shopping. I was trying to do with other people, but find nobody to do it with me. I was trying to cope with sex. He wouldn't do it with me, and I really couldn't find anybody else. So I was not really numbing myself. I was just committed to letting myself feel the pain. And it was just like one day after like the 8th or 10th EMDR session, I was just like, oh shit, I feel better. Like I realized I felt healed. I really can't describe it. I just was like, not like healed altogether. The image I used to get of us being trauma bonded was like all these cords wrapped around us. And I just would always pray and envision and ask God to like just break through the cords so that we could separate, because it was obvious we had like the toxic connection that was keeping us bound together. And I felt like the cords were like just breaking, like EMDR, do it, y'all, if you're in the same situation as me. And it was like I just started feeling better, and I was like, I'm gonna get on dating apps, I'm gonna start dating people, I'm gonna start riding the dick carousel. I was like, I just want to be free and start doing my own thing. I did end up starting to date someone who is kind and beautiful and amazing and wonderful and lovely and loyal and committed and generous and kind. And I have been dating this person for 6 months, and I'm really, really, really happy. We are still co-parenting, so it's still difficult and hard, and it's been challenging. It's been challenging for me to watch him date other people. It's been challenging, and I think it will probably be challenging and stay challenging, but I can say that I am constantly working to release myself further from trauma bonds that I know I still have. Still reading, still listening to books, still journaling, still doing my gratitude list, still doing meditation, still doing self-care, still doing dance, still doing everything I can. I'm really honest with my partner, and we talk about a lot of this stuff a lot. He encouraged me to do these videos. Yeah, so I'm really in a place that's good for everything I've been through. It was a hell of a journey, but I can say that in hindsight, there was a time where I chose not to hate him, not to hold this against him, and then I was not going to let it ruin me or ruin my life anymore. And then I just decided I'm going to choose to heal. I'm going to choose to experience post-traumatic stress growth, which is another whole thing that you can experience when you choose to learn from an experience, especially one as painful as this. I have never experienced anything more painful in my life than being narcissistically abused and severely verbally abused by someone who I loved and trusted. It harmed me. It hurt me more than I think even my father's sexual abuse. It's really difficult to explain if you have not been through it, how it makes you crazy as a person and how it harms you to your soul. But I'm better now. I'm better now, and it's not just because it's my partner, not because he's wonderful. It's not because of that. It's because I've done the work. I let grief do its work with me, and I'm free. I'm free. And I just want to encourage you, if you're in a similar position, to please get your freedom, no matter what. Because back in 2017, I thought I would never be happy a day without him. So, quick plug. One is please sign up for my newsletter, because I'm going to start doing more of these videos specifically about verbal abuse. Secondly, if you appreciate this, please go give to my Patreon. Give me $1 a month, $5 a month. Help a sister out, because I'm not monetized on YouTube, and I'm doing this in addition to my job and my 3 kids, and trying to start a course, which is number 3 or number 4. I'm going to be starting a course soon on how to survive verbal and or narcissistic abuse from the perspective of Black women, all of the verbal abuse that we experience as Black women. So please get on my newsletter list if you're interested in that. It's going to be extraordinarily affordable for the beta version, probably going to be $39. I'm going to start a community of Black women who have been through verbal abuse and or narcissistic abuse, probably a private Facebook group that will be part of being a part of the course, because I really want to start a community around this issue. So sign up for my newsletter, go give to my Patreon. Oh, the 4th thing is my book, Grace Actually. It goes through a lot of stories about stuff like this. I have 31 really good reviews, so obviously it's a big hit. So go ahead and go on Amazon and purchase it. And thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited to start my verbal abuse series. Freedom is possible. Bye, y'all. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment.